sorry, boss. There's been a screw-up. The helicopter can't make it right now. You're through to HQ. It's on its way to you right now.
I'm gonna need you to move out of my landing zone.
Hey, what's going on? Oh, hey, you're in trouble. Okay. I'll deal with it.
Make yourself comfortable. We'll try and make it as smooth a flight as possible. You gotta work, you gotta work. We're on the way. Be good now. I'll be waiting for another call.
There's the boss. Hello. How can I help you? Just let me know what you need. Anything to keep you productive, boss. Are you sure you need more snacks? Oh, hi. What do you need? How do you choose between your children? Look, we're having some problems in that area. It's gonna have to wait.
Welcome. Have a good time.
Yo, we still need to see that movie. That's right.
In addition to allowing the Ukrainians to target deep inside Russia, they're going to get another $700 million for whatever they decide to spend it on, I guess. I don't know what kind of auditing is going on in that country right now. I doubt there's much.
How much just to play with your teeth?
They're also going to be getting $3 billion per year from the UK. $3 billion per year. And it's already been confirmed by The Telegraph, which is a respected news agency inside UK, that the UK Defense Minister has approved Storm Shadow strikes into Russia. Zelensky is going to meet Biden in a couple days to seal the deal. Michael McCall, House Foreign Affairs Chairman, has confirmed that this, in fact, is going to be the course of events that unfolds. Now, unfortunately for Ukraine, the misadventure in Kursk may be starting to wind down a little bit, but we just never know. The Russians have gone on the counteroffensive. They have 50 to 60,000 troops in the region, and they're starting to push back what we presume is between 10 and 20,000 Ukrainian troops who are now quite dug in. Recall a couple days ago, Oladanov, one of the commanders overseeing operations in this region, had predicted that the Ukrainians were going to be the ones who went on the went on the offensive and made a run for the nuclear power plant once again. Well, here the clock is ticking, because now you have a situation in which they've just been given the green light to do deep strikes into Russian territory and potentially leverage their newfound capabilities to target these more strategic facilities that are within this region. We're talking, of course, about a nuclear provocation. Attacking the nuclear power plant is potentially the only thing they stand to gain out of this situation. I doubt that they're going to be able to fight off 50,000 Russians. It's just an untenable situation unless there's more Ukrainian troops there or they're planning on doing something else somewhere else. It's looking like the party's pretty much almost over at this point in time. So the question is, what are they going to do before the election? They already are running low on ATACMS, but there are some longer range variants that they perhaps haven't used yet because, well, there hasn't been a reason to use them, because why use your long range stuff if you can use your short range stuff? So there may well be a glut of long range weaponry waiting to be used, and it could just be that that's why the West is using it, because they don't have any more of enough of the short range variants to provide them anymore. Dmitry Peskov has also said the decision to strike deep into Russian territory with ATACMS missiles has already been made, and now they're trying to formalize it. Are they going to let this go? Are the Russians actually that stupid to let this go? I don't think they are. I think they're doing their darndest to try to prevent a nuclear war. This is near Russia, the Russian president's dacha in, I don't know what the actual lake is called. Let's see if we can find it here. This is at a lake right near St. Petersburg, big lake, Lake Ladoga, okay? This lake right here. I don't know if that's, I'm assuming that that's saline. It doesn't look like it could be possibly be fresh water. It might be. That's neither here nor there, but there's a couple warships there. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Okay, so we got a couple warships. This is right next to Finland, okay? So they have 2 corvettes there, and corvettes, I don't know how you say that. And these have caliber missiles on them with a 2,500, is it miles or kilometer range? These can have nuclear weapons on them. This is Putin's dacha right here, one of Putin's numerous dachas. I don't know why you'd have a dacha so close to Finland. Maybe it's nice up there. Regardless, this is not here to protect Putin's dacha. These things are here because Finland has F-35s and is currently engaged in a nuclear exercise with the United States. They are an integral piece of the decapitation strike puzzle. These warships are here to annihilate Finland when the shit hits the fan. That's what they're there for. Make no mistake about it. It's from September 8th, 2024. Lake Ladoga. Russia will be forced to use bigger weapons, according to the Russian Duma chairperson. Russia will be forced to use more powerful and destructive weapons to protect its people, according to Volodin. This was the Duma's chairman's reaction to Zelensky's request by Western countries for permission to use long-range weapons on Russian territory. If the Russians still think that they can contain this, I mean, you got Sergei Shoigu talking about how, well, if the Ukrainians just leave Kursk, then we're going to negotiate. Then it worked, right? They've been able to move the goalpost. The literal definition of moving the goalpost, Ukraine just did it, which would be, in a sense, a success. But the fact that he's saying that and not saying that we're just going to push them out anyways tells you that maybe they're not that confident in pushing them out as you might think. But he's saying that they cannot have any negotiations till the Ukrainians leave Kursk, which is giving people a false sense of hope, I do believe. But this is how the Russians tend to play ball. They tend to always leave the door open, or seemingly, at least in word only, leave the door open for diplomacy. If you think that Donald Trump is going to change anything about this, my friends, again, Lindsey Graham, his best buddy, the most pro-war guy, is best buddies, maybe not best buddies, but one of the biggest proponents of Donald Trump's campaign, who of course made an integral part of that campaign be his anti-war stance, which is just completely stupid. If anybody believes that, I mean, just think about it. The biggest war hawk in Washington, the biggest, bar none. There's no bigger war hawk in Washington that wants to go to nuclear war with the Russians and the Iranians simultaneously, okay? He is endorsing Donald Trump for some reason. What does he know? This is a guy who was one of the chief authors of the 2014 Maidan coup. So, believe what you want. There was a drone strike in Russia all the way the hell up here in Murmansk, I believe it's called. What it's called? Let's see here. We can go up to Murmansk. It's way the hell up here. Yes, Murmansk. The Russians, some Russian pundits are claiming, and bloggers are claiming, that this drone came from Finland and that there's no possible way that Ukraine could have flown a drone all the way up to here. Let's see, what would the distance be? I don't have my distance calculator. This is 1,000. So yeah, that's well over that's got to be like 1,500 kilometers or something. So from Ukraine all the way up to Murmansk, that's an incredible distance. The drone strikes continue. The probing of Russia's missile defense continues. Yep. 3 UAVs were brought down by Russian air defense in Murmansk. I'm not even going to talk about Erdogan in Turkey, because that guy's just silly. Now he's saying that, he was one of these fence sitters for the longest time, even though he's got NATO nuclear weapons in his country. Russia still pretends like he's their friend. He's basically saying now that this war only ends with Crimea returning to Ukraine, which is just, the Russians will never, the world will be extinct before that actually happens. Okay, we'll all be dead before that happens. And everybody knows that. Everybody in a position of authority knows that. I find this interesting. I'm not sure if many people realize this, but this is the total cost of mineral reserves throughout Ukraine. Unmined reserves. Okay, so you can see where the majority of the money is. When Lindsey Graham talks about all of the trillions and billions, should have a drinking game last night with Donald Trump every time he says billions. The next debate, gonna have a drinking game. Donald Trump We'll do a live feed, billions and billions. Anytime he says billions, we take a drink. Anyways, trillions and trillions of dollars in the region that Russia mostly controls. Most of the resource wealth in Ukraine is in the east. We're talking about 3.5 trillion in the Dnipropetrovsk, 3.8 trillion in Donetsk, 3.2 trillion in Luhansk, 600 billion in Zaporozhye, 685 billion in Kharkov. And then when you look over here, I mean, with the exception of Poltava, 790 billion, it recedes in terms of the value. Of course, they have a lot of agricultural, renewable land there, which I'm not sure they're factoring all that in. In the long run, that may pay off even more because Ukraine, of course, has very deep topsoil, the best topsoil on the planet, I'm told, and some of the most untapped topsoil on the planet. Gold continues to hold. It continues to trade in this range of like, how would you say, like between 20 and 25.50. It's pretty range bound. Gold is holding despite the oil crash, and I think the oil crash is something to do with the fact that global lockdowns in a martial law World War III format may well be on the horizon, and less to do with economic slowdown. Even though, I mean, let's take a look at the data. We can't be kidding ourselves here. Unrealized gains, losses on investment securities in the billions and billions of dollars for US banks are at an all-time high. That's absolutely insane. We're talking about $500 billion in just the most recent quarter of 2024. Absolutely crazy. These are monthly exports to Russia by country. Here we see the polarization visualized once again. Look at these Chinese exports to Russia skyrocket post-2022. Skyrocket, okay? China and the United States are most definitely going to war. There's no doubt about it. Maria Zakharova talked about an analogy that I've used a lot. I believe she's a foreign minister. I'm not sure of her exact title, but anyways, she's talking about, I'll read you her quote. She's saying, here's the Titanic, a powerful, very expensive, well-hyped ship, okay, with people on board who have reached significant heights in their careers, sailing somewhere in the Atlantic. And on board this very Titanic, there is a match between two famous fighters. I don't know, boxers, kickboxers, or say jiu-jitsu fighters. And so the match ends and people are sitting around asking, hey, who do you think won? But let's remember that this is all happening on the Titanic. And so who won in your opinion? There are only 15 minutes to go until the Titanic hits the iceberg. That's why, you know, and the Titanic is such a perfect analogy. I've used this for years because you do have all the elites who are starting to get onto the lifeboats, right? They're starting to buy their doomsday retreats and their homesteads. They're all doing it, guys. Patrick...
Next subject is our very own sun-kissed blonde from San Andreas. It's Cheetah. coaching moves like a cat, sucks like a vacuum. Give a shout for the lovely Nikki.
God damn, that ass.
How's that?
Woo! Nice titty meat, sweetheart.
You feeling it? How's that?
There is drive in each one of us.
For this video, I will be ones. Essentially, you guys would need to earn a nightclub, for example, or even it on this screen. I believe that this can also work the same. This onto the next AFK method that I will. This now brings us to my favorite AFK method, or at least it was my favorite AFK method. This was to watch the nightclub DJ livestream. I used this one so many times and it used to work so good. But of course, after waiting 15 minutes while watching the DJ livestream, I did get the kick warning. So even this method does not work anymore, which is super unfortunate. I tried this with the nightclub just to see if it would be any different. And you will see in the gameplay that the warning timer did appear on my screen saying that I had 5 minutes left before I was kicked. So it looks like this method is, or even a test track vehicle in the LS Car Meet test track. You can turn this car around and drive to sit on this screen and never get kicked. You guys might already be able to tell, but this also did not work and I was kicked. For some of you guys out there, this might still work. Even the other two methods might still work as well. For reference to it, you guys at the casino and run over, select place bet because you want. However, I would actually
like a pussycat. Hear her roar. It's time for the lovely cheetah.
Actually not recommend doing that. I'll be using for all of the methods I have to be active, which will move your character. Character was just looking around instead of moving as well, which actually resulted in me being kicked from the site. And this one had to wear or use a rubber band, GTA Online, and make sure your trigger is pressed. Is checking my businesses to see if they made any stock, but you should be able to do this absolutely anywhere in. Just go over it to see. And just like the DJ live stream, this one also made me millions of dollars whilst it was working. At this point in the video, we have tested pretty much all of the methods I wanted to try, but there is a couple more of them that supposedly did work. One of them was using the facility with the orbital cannon and using the spectate option. Supposedly you guys could just sit on this screen. I did try this and this one also did not work. I honestly thought this would work easily, but it looks like Rockstar are really trying to crack down on AFK methods. I'm not really sure why, because most of the things that you guys have to AFK for still take so many hours to even make you guys a lot of money. But the last AFK method that I have not currently tried is using the TV option inside your apartment and being in a public session. And instead of watching the TV channels, you guys want to switch through them until you get to the spectate players options. If you guys have used this before, essentially you can just spectate pretty much anyone in your session, all from the comfort of your apartment. Supposedly you can just sit on this screen and spectate players forever, but like I have just said, this is something that I have not tried. I rarely play in public sessions anymore, and there will be a downside to this one, because if this does work and you stay in this session for, let's say for example 7 hours or something, eventually everyone will just leave that session. There is also a big chance that you guys can be disconnected from this session, or even have just everyone disconnect from you, leaving you in a session all by yourself with nobody to spectate. So I would probably suggest trying that one out if you guys want to. That is the only method.
Now I want to hear a big cheer. She's one of our newer girls, the beautiful
Are you
Nikki.
busy with a Riz?
Before AFK are, so before we get to that, make sure you code this, bookmark it, restart your game, and then what you want to do is press online, jobs, play job, like 9 RPMs. Radio has a minute copyright.
You feeling it?
So anyway, might be a little bit different, and there's like this little
How's that?
There is drive in each one of us. Drive that doesn't question, but delivers. The 2025 Honda HR-V.
How do? Hear how they got on. Thanks for them. They were really good. They were interesting to read. Kicked. I think only went back for biscuits. Total lie, of course. You get kicked, which is really annoying. So how'd you get round that one? Please like and subscribe if you like, and we'll have a look. And they're all speeded up, these. I'll explain that in a sec, right after that. Yep, it's the trusty old rubber band trick again. And it works anywhere in GTA. Anywhere. As in free roam, just wandering about. But I've speeded these up so you're not seeing in bottom corner. You're going to get kicked after 5 minutes or whatever. You're not going to see it at all. I mean, this was a pity, this. I've spent hours on that sofa behind me, watching security cameras, trying to build all my money up and in all my businesses. But no, they've got rid of it, haven't they? But yeah, this place here, it'd make a fortune by morning. But no, it's all gone in here as well. But it hasn't. You have to sit in front of a screen, whereas this one you don't. You just put a rubber band, whichever you used to aim, trigger, button, whatever, put a rubber band round it. The trigger that I used to aim and that's it. Put it down, walk away. But all these here, these are for public lobbies, all indoors. You don't want to be outside at all, because someone will just spawn kill you all day. Well, while you're away, which should be very annoying. So yeah, always inside. This one's for invite only. I know you have to worry about with these NPCs, but yeah, door knocks. You think, I hope he's not bailiffs. Don't know you're on about, mate. Never heard of him. Bye. And then you come back, and you've still got your elastic band on. You haven't been kicked. Not at all. But I'm in the middle of this sort of like grass, because if you're too near NPCs, say door went again, it won't bailiffs. And I was talking for ages, but I just put band on and like rushed out and left him here, which wasn't a smart move. What I'm saying is there's a right place and a wrong place, so this was definitely wrong. All money's dropping. Just do that one more time. Just so you know, this you've got to go. It's a hill. And another thing GTA isn't short of, rooftops. I mean, there's, so you can go, because you can, like I say, you can go anywhere.
Next up, gents, it's our very own sun-kissed blonde from San Andreas. It's Cheetah. She moves like a cat, sucks like a vacuum. Give a shout for the lovely Nikki.
You feeling it?
one's a real cutie, and she's fucking dirty too. Yeah, Juliet.
This to your phone, PlayStation, to your phone, and then on the internet, and then move your cursor around using your mouse pad. While doing this, press the triangle button on PlayStation, or the equivalent button for your platform. This will then kick you out from your phone. You can then tell if this has worked correctly, as you won't get the camera changing to a cinematic view. The camera will stay on the character. This is how it will look. For some of you, you may need to have your controller plugged in and ensure your settings are so that your controller doesn't turn itself off.
Pussycat. Hear her roar. It's time for the lovely cheetah. beauty's got some serious moves on her. Give it up for the lovely Juliet!
That ass is banging.
On PlayStation or the equivalent phone and then on the internet, and then move your cursor around using your mousepad. While doing this, press the triangle button on PlayStation or the equivalent button for your platform. This will then kick you out from your phone. You can then tell if this has worked correctly, as you won't get the camera changing to a cinematic view. The camera will stay on the character. This is how it will look. For some of you, you may need to have your controller plugged in and ensure your settings mousepad. While doing this, press the triangle button on PlayStation or the equivalent button for your platform. This will then kick you out from your phone. You can then
Next up, gents, it's our very own sun-kissed blonde from San Andreas. It's Cheetah!
Bet David did a short, the streets in their homesteads. They're all doing it, guys, for years. You know, and the Titanic is such a perfect analogy. I've used this for years because you do have all the elites who are starting to get onto the lifeboats, right? They're starting to buy their doomsday retreats in their homesteads. They're all doing it, guys. Patrick Bet David did a short the other day where he was talking about how all of his rich buddies in the, was it Centimillionaire and Up class at this recent event he went to, they were all talking about prepping. Does it really matter? She says. There are only 15 minutes to go until the Titanic hits the iceberg. And by the way, I'm the violin guys on the Titanic, playing the violin. Or maybe I'm the guy screaming, "We're all gonna die!" I don't know. I haven't quite figured it out yet what my role is. I think that my blue strip content is to try to soothe people a little bit, and this content is just to remind people of how fucked we actually are. Does it even make a difference? I don't know. Maybe if someone thought that one of them would break into the wheelhouse and spin the helm the other way, find some maps, do something, check the lifeboats, I don't know, maybe some miracle would occur.
Do the best I can. I think we have a rather intriguing subject this morning. And I think to understand it, we have to take a general survey of the attitudes of ancient peoples regarding the future.
cutie, and she's fucking dirty too. Yeah, Juliet.
One of the earliest records that we have of the prophetic spirit is an inscription on the basis or base of a statue of the god Nebo of Babylon, probably dated somewhere about 2000 BC. And the god says, "That which has been will be. I am Nebo, the Lord of the writing table." Therefore, the entire concept of antiquity was that prophecy was based not upon calculations of starry portents or the consulting of more common and ordinary oracles. It was based upon the inevitable sequences of cause and effect. Whatever has been will come again if the cause comes again. And the prediction will not be dated in terms of years, but in terms of human relationships, the patterns that are set up in the various complexes of mortal society. The Great War, the last war, has occurred as a symbol in a great many different religions. It is recorded, of course, in the Bible. And probably the word Armageddon is derived from an early Palestinian term. It was the war in which the kings of the earth would make war against the hosts of heaven. And ultimately, the kings of the earth would be utterly discomfited. Perhaps the form of the story also borrows from Egypt, where it is tied closely into the myth of the dying god Osiris. Osiris, who was the principal deity of the later Egyptian recension, was foully slain by his own brother, who usurped his kingdom. After the death of Osiris, Isis, his wife, posthumously brought forth a child, Horus, the avenger of his father. Horus, the golden hawk, was the symbol of the resurrection of Osiris himself, who was said to have been reborn in his own son. And in the end, Horus led the hosts of light, their Shesti, the golden hawks, against the power and tyranny of Typhon. And there was a last great battle, and in this battle, Typhon was overcome and chained forever in the pits beneath the earth. This last great war also arises in the Hindu tradition. And the two great epics of India, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, both are concerned with a great symbolic conflict. In the Mahabharata is concealed the magnificent lines of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord's Song, in which the victory of life over death, of virtue and integrity over corruption, this victory is clearly set forth. In the Ramayana we have another great battle, more in an epic form, and somewhat reminiscent of the Odyssey and Iliad of Homer. But it was a great battle of evil against righteousness, and righteousness prevailed. Then you remember in the Nordic rites, the last battle on the plain of Ragnarok. It was here that the gods from high Asgard, the Nordic Olympus, gathered on the plain to have that last final conflict with the powers of evil. And the battle was a terrible one. And good and bad perished together, and the earth was desolated. But one couple escaped into a high mountain, and from them came forth a new race to replenish the earth. The war that is to end war is constantly referred to in different levels of human society. Primitive tribal beliefs, highly sophisticated epics deal with this subject. So it is interesting to try to understand, perhaps, how this concept developed until it has become an enduring belief. A belief that has about it the strange circumstance that generation after generation has identified this last war with the conflicts of their own times. Wherever a great emergency has arisen, it was believed or speculated that perhaps this was the Armageddon. And because the date was never given, there was no way of confirming it. I think, however, that if we study the subject in the spirit of the Sibylline prophecies and the great prophetic books of the Bible, Isaiah and Revelation, and perhaps the Chaldean oracles of the Zoroasters, we will come to a little different point of view as to the meaning of this magnificent, elusive prophecy. I think we will discover that it traces back perhaps to an intuitive quality within man himself. I think the human being, in the depths of his own nature, is a prophet. Down beneath the surfaces of his hopes and fears, his glamours and his attitudes, there is a strange, deep pathos, the same type of thing that we find in the great ring opera of Wagner, the great symbolism of something that is going to pass away because it has not within it the integrity of its own survival. The Sibylline prophecies have to do with not a date or a time, but a sequence of events. And every sequence of events comes finally to some kind of an Armageddon. Every form of history does this. Every religion has passed through this. Every science is born and dies because of the weaknesses within its own nature. And this sequence of weaknesses, this conflict between principle and ambition, probably lies at the very root of man's enduring belief that in the end virtue will be supreme. We see this very much about us today. We see it in the lives of individuals and in the motions of states. And probably in the last 2,000 years, we have seen strange fulfillments of warnings. We remember the admonition that those who live by the sword will perish by the sword. And this has happened many times in history. It is a prophecy that is forever fulfilling itself, not once but many times. We recognize this tragedy of human ambition, and that it exists because of human ambition. We read of Alexander the Great, dead at 30 under the walls of Babylon. Caesar, assassinated at the foot of Pompey's column. We see Napoleon, dying of cancer on the island of St. Helena. We see Hitler, committing suicide in a bunker in Berlin. We see Mussolini, hung from a lamppost in northern Italy. The path of glory leads but to the grave. Therefore, there is some reason why these various mistakes that people make individually and collectively have a consequence which is unavoidable. We are told in the Bible that cause and effect follow each other. We are told that as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Buddha puts it in slightly different words when he says, effects follow their causes, as the wheel of the cart follows the foot of the oxen. Therefore, wherever there is a causation of catastrophe, and that causation is not transmuted, the evil is not corrected, then in the due course of time, the catastrophe comes. It is unavoidable. And down inside of ourselves we know this, but we do not want to admit it. Each individual wants to be an exception to the law of cause and effect, but no one is an exception. And unless the individual builds his life upon integrities, he is going to inevitably come into conflict with law. Not man-made law necessarily, but the law governing life itself. For there are principles in the universe which cannot be violated. And I think the whole story of the Armageddon represents the climax of any type of sequence of events in which evil predominates. We find it in our personal lives. We find it in the story of the alcoholic. He feels that he is going to be an exception. Yet if he continues and does not correct his faults, he will die of his own shortcoming. The narcotics addict is in the same condition. There is no way of winning against the common laws of truth and reality which supervise and control all things. Even in business and politics and all the different professions, we are seeing today a great deal of harvesting. We are seeing every day how mistakes have been allowed to pile up, how individuals have placed their own advantage above the common good, and as a result have brought the common good and themselves down into ruin. We are aware that constantly that which is not true comes into conflict with the inevitable patterns of reality which cannot be violated. Every effort we make to transgress ends only in a disaster for ourselves. Now, this being the case, and most individuals having at least down somewhere in their natures at least an intimation that this is true, there comes always the problem that philosophy, culture, ethics, all these subjects have dealt with, that as the individual discovers that the integrities within himself are weakening, it is then time for him to make a strong resolution to correct his own fault. In every sequence of disasters, there is a moment when prudence, strength, courage, or integrity could transmute the evil. In every sequence of problems, there is a point at which personal integrity could solve the problem. If this is not available, if the individual does not rise to this occasion and permits the kings of this world to gain ascendancy over his life, he will then come face to face with the ultimate conflict. So it is very important, it seems, for each individual to regard the Armageddon as tied directly to himself. We are not the victims of history. We are not the victims of the earth's imperfections. We are the victims of our own mistakes. It is not heaven that brings down a nation. It is the works of humanity, misunderstood works, corrupted works, that will bring down the greatest nation the world can produce. It is all, in the last analysis, a problem of man's own development of integrities. Well, he drifts along with a few virtues which he is trying to live. He is hoping definitely that the heaven will forgive him for his shortcomings. There is no evidence that heaven even judged him for them. The judgment comes from himself. He knows his own shortcomings, whether he admits them or not. He may conceal them from others and hide them from his own conscience, but he knows he has them. And this type of thing produces in life after life a personal Armageddon, in which the individual must face up to his own integrities or suffer the consequences. Dissipation has its price. Corruption has its price. And most of all, self-centeredness has its price. Practically every tragedy in history has been born of human selfishness. Individuals have desired and determined to use the skills that have been given to them in a ruthless competition against their fellow human beings. We have placed profit above integrity. We have placed the struggle of competition as an inevitable truth and cooperation as a dim, idealistic uncertainty. As a result of that, we have created in each department where we have compromised principles the beginnings of a story that will end in an Armageddon. In every case, we finally come face to face with the facts. We either meet them or fail. If we meet them, we have achieved the purpose of life, which is victory over weakness. If we fail to meet them, then as far as this life is concerned, we have failed regardless of how much wealth, fame, or authority we have accumulated through the corruption of principles. Now we look around and we find the world in a condition in which a number of preachers and evangelists are talking about the Armageddon. It looks like it's here again. I think this is a mistake. It is here still. It is here because it has never been met. It was here in the first time when a caveman threw a rock at another caveman. This was the beginning of war. And it will continue as long as the individual inside of himself wants to throw a rock. He may dress the rock up in a nuclear weapon, but it is still the old rock going on doing its original mischief. It is not the fact that at one time, somewhere, in a datable future, we are going to see the heavens open and the archangelic hosts come down and cleanse the earth. This is not what we are confronted with. We are confronted with the fact that in the due course of every civilization, every person's life, every invention, art, science, craft, trade, there are rules. And if these rules are broken, universal law, which is always here, steps in and balances the books. When this happens, a lot of misery seemingly occurs. Individuals are frustrated in all their ambitions and all their prides. But it is either that they shall have that bad moment and then gradually come back to integrity, or they will destroy everything that they have hoped to gain. Now we are in the very edge of a very difficult international world situation. We are in the presence of an accumulation of thousands of years of mistaken activity. Now in most people's minds, the worst mistakes have been the most pleasant occurrences. the individual has found that it is possible for him to have more money than his neighbor. It is possible for him to be elected to public office and have quite a following. It is possible for him to be a lawmaker and make many laws that are especially beneficial to himself. He has all kinds of opportunities. And we see around us a world of trade, of barter, exchange, of investment, of speculation, a world of individuals all working desperately for their own benefit. Now this is regarded as virtuous. Why shouldn't we go out and work for our own benefit? Why should we give any consideration to anybody else? Why should we put someone else's good whom we don't even know above our own opportunity to do unusually well? The answer is that we are part of a collective, and the moment we begin to corrupt our neighbors, the moment we begin to exploit each other, each man exploits himself, but he doesn't know it. He is gradually building for the complete destruction of the system he has abused. And somewhere along the line there will always be what has been produced by nature over thousands of years. There will be prophets. There will be someone arise who sees the facts, who tries to do something about it. Perhaps he is accepted, more likely he is rejected because he interferes with the personal privileges of the individual. Some cases he has been martyred, in many cases he has been ridiculed. But always along the way, there comes a moment or a time in which the facts are available and the individual can learn. This is his big decision, whether he is big enough, wise enough, and virtuous enough to sacrifice something of his own ambitions to accomplish the preservation of the society to which he belongs. If he does not have this desire, he will then drift with it until it all falls apart together. For the problems that destroy society are the injustices allowed to linger within the nature of the human being himself. As long as they are there, trouble will continue. Another field where Armageddon shows up quite repeatedly is in domestic relationships. Young people starting out in marriage are filled with hopes and filled with aspirations. They think they're going to be able to make a wonderful life. But very few sit down for a moment even before this fatal step is taken to determine what they are really thinking, what they really believe, what they actually want. Do they really want to build a strong relationship? Or do they want to unite for some type of personal profit? Are they out for something they want to take rather than what they want to give? Are they more inclined to be self-centered? Do their own ambitions transcend the family good? Do they neglect each other or their children in the search of privileges for their own pleasure? If so, they are building up an Armageddon. There'll come a time when perhaps they'll settle down and have a long heart-to-heart talk about it. If something good comes out of that, perhaps the home is preserved. On the other hand, if in this discussion each individual remains set in his ways and determined to have his own way at the cost of all else, then the war breaks out. Then the kings of the earth go to war against the hosts of heaven. For the integrities of life are heaven bestowed, and the inequities come from the hosts of earth. So everywhere we go, anywhere we turn, we will find that there are opportunities to arbitrate the great conflict. Perhaps we can't arbitrate it indefinitely or completely, but if we try, we can always lift a great deal of the burden. We can correct some faults that are possible for us to correct, and in that way add further vitality and endurance to our civilization and our way of life. So in this problem, the problem that has annoyed, worried, or bestirred many people for a long, long time is that what is to happen. And we are told that after the Armageddon, or after the loss of the war of Kurukshetra, after the Golden Hawk has won against the hosts of Typhon, there comes the new heaven and the new earth. Now this can happen in the individual also. A lot of theologians feel that if an individual turns from a very secular type of life and accepts spiritual instruction and rededicates his career to the service of principles, that he is born again, that he has created inside of himself a new heaven and a new earth, that he has found the strength of peace and integrity, charity and kindness. If these transformations take place within the person, then truly we are facing inside of ourselves the millennium. The old prophets also carried the idea that after the last great war there would be a new heaven and a new earth, not only within us, but within the great world environment in which we live. If the selfishness is taken out of ourselves, the corruption of our natural resources is prevented. If we build our lives upon principles, then we will fail to destroy the planet on which we live. And if we are truly intelligent and wise and thoughtful, then comes the Paraclete, or the Prince of Peace. Then comes a new law and a new cycle of existence, and we shall follow the way of heaven instead of the way of earth. And if we follow the way of heaven, we will be blessed by the virtues and integrities within ourselves. But there is no possible way in which we can pile up a defense of vices which will protect us in an emergency. No matter what we do, unless we change the basic principle of life, making integrity the final criterion of all things, until then we are in danger. We are in danger not because heaven wishes to destroy us, but because we choose to destroy ourselves. So we are all concerned now quite a bit, and we wonder what is going to happen. Are we going to be able to handle this difficulty? Again, we can look about us and see what is happening. We observe all kinds of emergencies arising, and we find, we might almost say, the last desperate stand of that which must inevitably fail. We are witnessing a condition in which, unless there is a major change of integrities, we are not going to be able to solve the problem. We are never going to be able, in military way, to bring peace to the earth. We will never be able, in the exploitation of resources, to attain security. We can never buy our way to peace any more than the Roman Empire could buy its way to peace. All these things have been tried before. We can never control so much that what we control cannot revolt against us. There is only one possibility to the solution of all difficulties, and that is that all the nations and all the beliefs claiming the same thing shall obey their own claim, namely that there is a fundamental integrity as stated by religion, as supported by philosophy, and as being gradually discovered by science. And if this is not used, then most of our hopes are in vain. On the other hand, there is something else that we have to recognize, namely that if in our own hearts and minds we make the necessary adjustments, it may well be that just because we are little people without very much authority or power, that we are not going to be able to change the course of history. As individuals, we cannot. It is only as groups that we can have a powerful influence. The more persons who see the facts, the safer the world will become. But in that transitional period in which perhaps we believe we have seen some facts, and we worry and are gravely concerned because of the conditions around us, then I think it is very definitely necessary to realize that the law of cause and effect, which is producing these circumstances, is not a law of extermination. It is not a law in which the end of universal process is annihilation. It is a law in which, in the long and greater span of things, it is necessary to prevent corruption from gaining too strong a hold upon the world. It is part of a plan that says, when you make a mistake, you are punished. And as a result of a few punishments, you learn not to make the mistake. You may hold out for quite a while, but in the end, the punishments which come as the result of wrong living will discourage the mistakes. They will not go on. Man will not exterminate himself. Man will not destroy himself, because he can make himself massively uncomfortable. He can get into more scrapes and problems than he ever wants to face. But there is within the human spirit itself an incorruptible, which is going to fight on until it wins. But it has to win in the service of truth. It cannot win in any other way. Many nations of the past have failed and faded away from us. And each of these nations more or less perished as the result of an Armageddon. It was this type of internal corruption that destroyed the Grecian states, destroyed Egypt, brought down Asia in ruin, and destroyed very largely the whole cultural system of the Mediterranean and Western Europe. The conditions followed that pattern. Nations have faded away. Whole processes of hope have vanished. And yet humanity has gone on. Humanity is a strangely wonderful, vital thing. It is something that continues and goes on, but leaves behind the ruins of its own mistakes. Now, it's always hoped that the individual will not be forced again to go through so strenuous and perhaps so painful a process of regeneration. The old Rosicrucians referred to the Universal Reformation, the conscious creation of the army of the Golden Hawk. In the case of the Nordic rites, Odin and the Aces of Mount Asgard gathered together the heroes from the battlefields of life. They gathered up all of those who died in the defense of good causes. And the Valkyrie carried these heroes to the eternal feasting of the gods. And from them was formed the last army that was to protect heaven against the ravages of the underworld. In the Egyptian story, the Golden Hawk, they were the enlightened ones. They were the ones who saw the truth. They were the soldiers of the cross. They were the ones who fought not with guns or swords and spears, but fought with truth, with integrity, with the armament of wisdom, of patience and forgiveness. And this army of the Golden Hawk represents that ever-increasing group of human beings who begin to understand, who are no longer completely dominated by the corruptions of their time. And we see this army forming everywhere, even now. In one nation, there is a great move toward peace. In another nation, there are reforms in the living conditions. In another nation, we have a liberalization of education. In still other areas, different religions are getting together. But where they do not get together, then we have the making of an Armageddon. We have a making of a great struggle based upon an intolerance. Where tolerance exists, there is a new army of light to help causes out. Then we find movements, organizations everywhere, seeking justice, seeking integrity. We have a great revival of religion in many parts of the world as a first defense, because after all, the army of the hawk, or the army of the light, must be spiritually integrated, spiritually inspired. It must not expect God to be on its side, but it must be on the side of God. And in these dedications and reconsecrations, thousands, millions of young people who grew up in a generation of atheism and agnosticism are beginning to recognize the tremendous need for spiritual integrities. And gradually this change in human nature is going to result in the development of the protecting army. The army of the light is also being formed. And somewhere along the line, the army of the light must face the army of darkness. And if the light is sincere and honest, then the darkness will be overcome. No corruption can withstand the strength of direct and honorable virtue. So that we are watching as this problem is producing its own panacea. There will be an alignment somewhere along the way in which the forces that believe in truth must come head-on into confusion or into collision with the forces who deny the existence of any truth except self-gratification. This may come, but on the other hand, it may simmer down into nothing more or less than a gradual change of point of view. Because millions of people, as soon as they realize that they have support, will turn toward righteousness and turn toward truth, because it is happier, it is more pleasant, more protective of all the values and virtues with which we are concerned. The fact that young people are beginning to need religion and find it, that many, many people are rebelling against corruption in every walk of life, means that in time these rebellions will cement into a new point of view. And if this new point of view comes, the war may not be a head-on collision at all, but a gradual shift of perspective, with a few adjustments and a few people with headaches, but the majority of individuals rejoicing in a better state of things. It is amazing that the human being should be satisfied to be miserable. It is hard to understand how we are willing to do so many unpleasant things and gain out of it nothing but further unpleasantness. Why does it happen that we nurse grievances, fully aware that the more we nurse them, the more we will grieve? Why not get over the grievance in the first place? Why should we spend a life nursing hatreds? Why should we look back and remember every unhappy thing that has been done to us and completely forget any unhappy things we did to other people? Why do we have these habits? Well, it seems to be that the reason we have them is because they are part of a common heritage of ignorance to which we are all indebted. An inheritance of it's always been that way, therefore it always will be. My ancestors didn't like each other, why should I? We don't realize that when we look back on our ancestors that they died of their dislikes. And that with these dislikes they created wars and crimes and overcame good things, impoverished themselves and their families. And yet we keep right on doing it. There is, however, nature stepping in. Nature knows that there is a potential for solution inside of the human being. That down at the very depths of ourselves, we are honorable. That regardless of all the incrustations of errors that surface us, the depths are honest. Because at the very root and source and depth of ourselves is the divine principle by which we exist. The Spirit in us, the divine power in us, is uncorrupted. but it is bound and burdened. It is imprisoned within a pattern of attitudes, a way of selfishness, and an endless determination to gratify our superficial desires. We have just refused to permit the best part of ourselves to come through. This probably is one of the interesting aspects of Zen Buddhism and some of the Oriental philosophies that we are just beginning to appreciate. Nearly all of them are based upon one basic principle: be still and know that I am God. In quiet meditation, in relaxation away from worldly possessions, detachments from false ambitions, the individual finally can reach communion with himself. He can find the reason for his own existence if he will be quiet, if he will release and relax, and will get away for a while from the tremendous pressures of temporality. If he will get over the idea that he has to have a bigger house, or that he needs another swimming pool, or that his car is an antique because it's 6 months old, he will have a little time for something else. And difficulties arising now are cutting desperately into the profit theory that most people have lived by. We are beginning to find that it's getting tighter. And regardless how we feel, we must partly blame ourselves for the existing conditions. We have spoiled ourselves. Now we are suffering from the results of this spoilage. So with a little quietude, a little integrity, the individual will begin to simplify life. And as he does this, he gradually separates himself from the factors that would involve him in the strenuous revolution of an Armageddon. The individual who is willing to begin the orientation of himself and begins to put value where it belongs will find that it is true. The thousands can fall on the right hand and thousands on the left, but the just man shall not be moved. When we begin to understand the reason for things, we are not going to be constantly agitated and distressed because some of our luxuries are impaired. We are going to realize that the whole program of nature is to get man back on the path, get him going in the direction he should be going. The direction that leads ultimately to peace and security for himself and his world. Now, in the old Sibylline days, these prophetesses are said to have been members of a kind of secret organization, and that these prophetesses all predicted that in the fullness of time a Redeemer would come, that at the proper moment a new king would arise after the Armageddon, and the world should be ruled by a divine power. Come. That at the proper moment a new king would arise after the Armageddon, and the world should be ruled by a divine power. That all of the selfishness of things will pass away. One of the prophecies of the Sibyls was that gold and silver shall lose their guile. All the things that have tempted man away from his own integrities will of themselves cease, because they're only there because men support them, because they believe in them, and because they want to perpetuate them. Now, the question always arises in the minds of a great many people as to how we could live if we didn't have all this pressure. If we would settle down to the quiet ways of life, could we survive? Is it possible under the present situation to take care of the perpetuation of the species without this endless conflict and this endless disparity of opportunity? Well, there's a question there, and maybe it's a question that must be faced someday. But there is a point which we can face, a degree of it, in which we can come to the certainty that the essentials of life are available. if we know how to use them, and if we use them without exploitation. This tremendous overculture, this overpowering economic structure, is not justified by nature. It is not part of an original plan for things. It has been built up like the patches on the coat of many colors, simply because every mistake led to some kind of a new legislation, and this in turn led to others to ultimate confusion. The problem of why are we here must finally come into focus. Are we here simply to keep on grubbing along until we use up everything we have? Are we here until it becomes necessary for us to try to fly off to some other planet which may or may not be inhabitable? Is it necessary for us to keep on polluting the atmosphere, polluting the water, and destroying endangered species until nothing is left? This is a rather dismal prospect, but a lot of people are acting as though this was the inevitable end and that there's no way of avoiding it. There are many ways of avoiding it. One of the ways to avoid it is to begin to examine ourselves in another and more critical sense of the word. What have we got inside of ourselves, which is more important than what we are trying to do outside of ourselves? Those who have given much thought and study and meditation to this problem realize that the great unexplored territory at the present time is the inner life of man himself. We have no understanding whatever of the potential of the human being. We are quite convinced that he is a very animated and sapient biped who wanders about making trouble for himself and other people. We are convinced that if he adds up $1 billion, that he has fulfilled his own potential, even though he loses it the next day. But we have never really explored the human being to find out what he is good for. We do not know what raw material is locked within him. We are doing everything we can to change the world, but giving very little thought to the unfoldment of the natural resources of man himself. What would he have to do or be in order to be happy? What would be necessary in order for him to be safe for himself and others? What is the end that would more than justify the sacrifice of a lot of castles and sand piles? What would be in man that would be worth more to him, to everyone else, and to his own happiness and security than $10 million in the bank? Well, man is a potential masterpiece. But for one reason or another, he has deformed the sculpturing himself. He is no longer giving attention to the possibilities of his own nature. The solution to his problems are not necessarily in the pushing of his present procedures beyond a reasonable limit. What would we feel, how would we feel, if, for instance, in a little period, few thousand years at most, maybe less, we began to develop the extrasensory band within the human being? Supposing in the course of time we reach a point in which inwardly we have sensory perceptions that would enable us to judge and estimate practically everything in nature. How would it be if, for instance, we came to a point where there could be in this world no such a thing as a secret? Supposing that we can read everybody's mind. And, of course, everyone is reading ours at the same time. Supposing there'd be no need for concealment and no possibility of it. Well, in our present situation, this would practically result in universal bankruptcy. We can't trust ourselves, and we have greater distrust of others. Supposing our politicians could never hide anything from us. Supposing our lawyers couldn't. And supposing we had an understanding of our own lives and our own bodies to the degree that a physician could not make a mistake. And supposing all of this costs nothing.